SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. We all want to build solid, professional and hopefully friendly relationships with and between our employees. But how can we develop the trust and respect that's required to make that happen? Organisational psychologist Stephanie Bown says we all need to express more vulnerability. So how do we do that? Stephanie explains to Jeff Waters.
Trust is one of those funny things where in order to build trust, we must be vulnerable. To be vulnerable is to trust, and to trust is to be vulnerable. Daniel Coyle wrote The Culture Code. He talks about the vulnerability loop. So it starts with person A shares something vulnerable, person B responds in kind, person A recognises that person B did respond in kind, and trust is formed. And what that means is that in order to feel like I am being trusted, I need to first extend the hand of trust. I need to say something vulnerable, which might mean sharing my real opinion, sharing a personal experience that maybe puts me in a place where I'm not the one that has it all together 100% of the time. I experience a little bit of anxiety, or I'm unsure about things, or I don't necessarily agree with what's being said, but I want to voice that in the spirit of trying to make the situation better or the problem-solving process better. So we do need to put ourselves out there and be real, and then kind of just trust that the people around us are going to listen and respect the fact that we've done that and feel that they can also respond in kind.
There's two aspects to what we're talking about, and that's employee to employee, but also employer to employee. One of the things I've learned while hosting this podcast that I should have known all my life was that a workmate, and we're addressing the first one here, a workmate is not your friend, and that there's competition in the workplace as well. So taking that first instance of peer to peer, it's a fine line. How do I make sure that I'm not opening myself up to possible ramifications in the future?
I think it's an interesting conversation, because agree that you can trust and respect and work with people at work regardless of liking them. So they don't need to be your friends. But what we need to do is work together. And so when I'm talking about building trust in teams are teams that where it's safe, it's psychologically safe to point out the flaws in our process or the gaps in our vision or the ways that we're working that don't sustain us. That's why we need to build trust in teams with our peers. We need to be able to call help in when we need it, but also call each other on the stuff that's not potentially stacking up to what needs to stack up. Teams are successful because we work together. We each hold a component part of a role or a task, and we pass it on to the next person, and they take their bit and they add to that. So we need to trust that they're going to do that. And they're going to do that in the time that it's happening. And when it's not, we need to know that we can have the conversation openly. Too many teams I come across don't feel like it's safe to raise the issue. And then it goes underground and it's not dealt with, and things slow down and the quality becomes poor as a result of that. So what we need is trust, openness and safety to address the problems, the challenges and the opportunities as they arise, especially with our colleagues, regardless of whether they're mates or not.
Well, I'll come back to asking you about how we achieve that. But first of all, I just want to address the employer to employee situation. How can an employer build trust in themselves from their employees?
So as an employer, if you're a leader of an organisation or a leader of a team, it really is about you sharing what's real for you. You know, this is my vision for the team and the organisation. This is what I know and anticipate the challenges are going to be. This is where I believe in our capacity to meet that vision. This is where I need your help. I have hired and engaged a great workforce of talented people. I am going to trust you to do what I'm hiring you to do, to bring your mind to work, bring your passion to work. I'm going to enable you to do that. So share what's real for you, share what's going on for you, share your beliefs and the visions that you have. And then the trust that comes in is the empowerment piece. It's like, I'm going to give you an opportunity to show me that you can shine. And where people do stack up, that's wonderful. But where they don't, it's being able to then go and have the conversation and give the direct feedback that is going to help them know where they're at, and the coaching and the support to get there. So that's how you build trust. It's not about patting people on the back for stuff they're not performing when they're not performing to your expectations. It's about being real, trusting that your feedback is going to be useful, being overt about what you need, and then inviting those team members to really come to the party on that and share with you what's real for them, what their expectations of you are, asking them for feedback in that process, making it an open conversation, an open feedback loop.
I suppose more private people would be afraid of oversharing, though.
Again, you don't need to share anything personal. This is not about your personal life. This is not about your private fears of, what's going on in your relationships. It's not about that. It's about what's happening at work. So it is about, where are we, or are we not meeting each other's expectations for performance and for behavior? And we can only do that when, I think, where leaders have the greatest opportunity to open a trust and vulnerability loop is to ask for feedback ourselves. So to first say, what can I be doing differently as a manager to improve this? Am I communicating clearly enough?
Could be dangerous.
Well, but absolutely. But of course, we expect others to take that feedback on from us, right? So if we're not open to it, if we're not willing to listen, then how can we have that expectation of them too? And you know what? If all else fails, people can give you feedback as much as they like. Whether you choose to act on it is completely up to you. But being willing to listen to what people have to say, that's what builds, that level of trust and psychological safety that we all want in teams, so that people can actually share the reality of the truth that's happening.
Absolutely. Now, as we mentioned earlier, I wanted to ask you about or some practical tips perhaps on how I can build this sort of environment within my team.
Yeah, so look, really practically, it is things like feedback sessions. So at the end of meetings or at the end of important interactions, being able to say, hey, how was I then? How did I go? How can I be better? How could I have maybe tweaked my language or maybe listened a little bit differently to have made that a better experience for everybody? So ask for feedback and accept it well. Say thank you for it. And so that's a really great way to start. And then I think in reverse, how can I build trust in a team? It's really about how do I create environments where we're going to stop and share our real viewpoints and open ourselves up to a diversity of views. So really challenging and asking people, I want to hear where you don't agree or where you're unsure. I'd really like to understand those perspectives in the room, because that's going to help us push past, the obvious stuff into something that's potentially new. So inviting yourself, making yourself open to feedback, but also creating an environment where it's safe for people to say the stuff that maybe they don't think is appropriate or they're holding on to.
Terrific. Okay, so how does this relate to respect, and how do I get people to respect each other in their team?
Yeah, so trust and respect are like the two fundamental, essential ingredients for any relationship. We can't have successful relationships if we don't have those two things, trust and respect. So if trust is essential to vulnerability, then respect is essential to showing up. So respect ensures that what we're doing is appreciating differences. Not just accepting differences, we're appreciating differences. So we acknowledge and invite the full scope of perspectives in a room or in the people we're dealing with, and we withhold our judgment. And so instead of trying to rebut or maintain our own judgment or our own view, we're actually curious about that. We're curious about seeking others' perceptions and their perspectives and the reasons why they think different ways. We all know that diverse workplaces tend to produce better results over time because we want diversity of thinking in workplaces. We want different viewpoints. It helps us understand how we can adjust our products and services to better meet customer expectations if we're thinking about it from a diverse set of viewpoints. But it's easier said than done, having a workplace where diversity is really embraced and accepted. And it's not just diversity in terms of characteristics. Why we want diversity in characteristics is because we want diversity of thinking. It sounds great, but it's actually hard to do.
So how do you overcome that? How can you achieve it?
I think there's a couple of things we can do. It is, to that point I was making before, invite different viewpoints in a room and start to listen to your own biases. Start to notice that if I have a reaction to somebody else's viewpoint, try and be a little bit curious yourself about why you're having that reaction. What is it about me that's getting triggered here? How can I be a little bit more curious about why that person is sharing that viewpoint? I really think in today's world, we're picking sides a lot, politically, environmentally. It's happening around the world. Respect is about trying to withhold your own judgment for just a little bit to listen to the reasons why others might think different ways. Now, the reasons why we need this in teams is because it forces us out of our kind of square box of how we're thinking at the moment. We've got problems we don't have answers to. We've got supply chain challenges. We've got environmental challenges. We've got customers who have different needs. We need to start innovating. And to innovation means really if we can contain a real diversity of perspectives, then that's the juice for a creative process. So if we can actually listen to, respect and hold multiple different viewpoints, that actually allows us to push past what's already known into something that's new. So there's a lot of value that comes from diversity and respecting differences and opinions and creating an open field for people to have their say.
That's organisational psychologist Stephanie Bown. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel.